Hi guys, so I'm gonna go over the classical argument outline for you, and I'm also going to attach, by the time you watch this video, there will be attached hard copy of this outline if you wanted to print it out, and I will just go over it real quick in this video. So the difference between the papers you have written so far and the classical argument is that you are taking, especially if you're in English 101, you are finally taking a stand. And the format of this argument is what's considered, what makes it classical is that it looks at the argument, it looks at the issue from both sides of the story. It's somewhat similar to comparison and contrast, where you're presenting one side and you present the other side. However, what makes it an argument is that you're actually taking a stand and you are arguing that one side is stronger than the other. That's what essentially it comes down to. So your introduction will be just your typical introduction. You want to introduce your topic, maybe by giving us some background and history. If applicable, you may want to include important dates, mention some people or organizations. For example, if I were writing about animal rights, I probably would have to mention PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. And, maybe I wanted to write whether their methods are ethical or not in the first place. But, that would be something useful to mention. If it's not applicable, if there are no specific dates or specific people you want to mention, or your topic is so simple that it hardly needs any definitions, that's absolutely fine. But typically you would have some background. If you want to talk about genetically modified foods, you want to mention that they're abbreviated as GMO and give us a brief definition of what they are. So should come intuitively to you. All right. So you will end your introduction with your thesis statement in this. I suggest this format, but you can modify it as you wish. Although many disagree, I believe that, and then you fill in the blank, because of reasons 1, 2, and 3. When you finally write your draft, don't use the numbers 1, 2, 3. This is just for your convenience. So, for example, although many disagree, I believe PETA's, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, methods are dangerous because they interrupt public events, they release animals that are infected, and reason number 3, I will find my research because I cannot think of one from the top of my mind right now. So your reasons 1, 2, 3 will come from your research. So you will follow the typical steps of looking at the paper topics, choosing 1 or 2, seeing what's available. Does it intrigue you to the point that you actually want to write about, but it doesn't make you so mad that you can't even focus and write about it, because that does happen. You do not want to choose a topic that makes you so upset that you can't even focus and you just want to fight with everybody. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to choose, literally our textbook says that you don't want to choose a topic that's overly emotional to you. So that would be the last sentence of your introduction. As you would guess, the body of the paper, lines of arguments, I was taught to call it lines of arguments when I was a student. Students will typically refer to it as my reasons. So I said your reasons. So the lines of arguments will contain 3 paragraphs where you will develop each reason one by one. First reason, I believe that People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals are a dangerous organization, are because they disrupt a lot of public events in very violent, unacceptable ways. And then I would have to do my research, cite some examples, cite my sources, and so forth. Then I go to second reason is another paragraph, and a third reason. Typically, a paragraph is a minimum of 5 sentences, so 6, 7 sentences usually develops a point enough. Now, here's the part that you are less used to, and it's called opposing viewpoints and refutations. This is where you examine the other side of the argument. Opponents argue that would be sufficient if you just have 1 or 2 sentences here. All you need to do is mention what the opposing viewpoint believes. for example, if I were writing on divorce, for example, and a lot of people feel that divorce is very damaging to the children, and I would say, uh, well, my thesis would be that divorce is not dangerous for the children, not traumatic, not as traumatic as we thought in the past. And I would say opponents argue that divorce is very traumatic. However, and then I would write a paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences, saying that new studies suggest that divorce is actually beneficial to children because the stress of growing out in a household where parents constantly fight is far more traumatic to students than having to go back and forth between the two parents' homes. So you are being a little bit evil here, and that's what makes a classical argument, is that you do admit that there is an opposing viewpoint and you considered it. However, you showed to people that it is inadequate, incomplete, not well researched, biased, or is no longer true in the modern world since we have more research. I do want to mention to you that between the lines of arguments and opposing viewpoints, I will sometimes have students who will start writing in defense of one side of the argument, but as they do their research, once they start doing opponents argue that, and however, and once they do that, they're like, oh my gosh, Ms. Szymanski, I changed my mind. And I'm like, well, that's wonderful. That's what education is for, because you have educated yourself and you made yourself um, you arrived at the educated conclusion. You decided for yourself based on what information you had. So that's actually a neat little moment. So if that occurs, if that happens to you, it is completely normal, and all you have to do is flip the two sections around and just revise it slightly. But the amount of work that you are putting into writing the paper is the same. So we had three opportunities, three different reasons that we listed here. Therefore, it's only fair that we bring up three opposing viewpoints. And of course, the only reason you bring them up is so that you can destroy them. I do want to tell you 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, they're not connected with each other at all. However, it will happen from time to time that they will more or less echo each other. People do argue about the same things over and over again. So you may find yourself repeating yourself a little bit. If it's done a little bit and it's justifiable, it will be okay. If it's excessive, you're not really bringing any new information. It's just he said, she said. I will probably point that out to you and I'll say, listen, you need to find another stronger reason. So keep that in mind. That pretty much concludes the body, and the last part of it will be the conclusion. And as you already know at this point, you simply restate your thesis statement. And in this paper, it would be very appropriate to end with a call to action or whatever you want to end with. But typically, yeah, if you're writing an argument, then you probably want the audience to agree with you. And initially, you want to choose a topic here, and most of the topics on my list already are like that, that you want to choose something that's worth arguing about, where at least 50% of people disagree with you. Therefore, if everyone agrees with you, it's not even an argument. Okay, so the sources for this paper, you should end up with 6 to 8 sources total. 2 to 4 of them, ideally 4 of them, should come from Academic Search Complete. I will allow you to use 1 to 2 good websites, and you can actually have something we've never done before, is a personal interview or a brochure or some kind of audio-visual source that you think is interesting. You definitely want to choose something that's applicable. I once had a student whose father worked in prison, and she interviewed him on her argument was to introduce yoga to the prisoners. I think right now it's some degrees being implemented, or is not anything new, the use of meditation or yoga in all kinds of correctional facilities settings. But at that time, it was fairly revolutionary. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna I'm gonna upload this as a file if you want to just print it out and look at it, go over it again or listen to the narration again. And in Blackboard due dates, what I've done is I divided the entire paper, which is 8 paragraphs long. You have different due dates for each section. So if you stay with a calendar and you submit your work, you should be on schedule. So that's that. Please call or email if you have any questions.